Play therapy. Play therapy it's amazing. My business partner, Aaron, is a fantastic certified play therapist here in San Antonio, and I have the ability a lot of the times to kind of sit in and watch what takes place in play therapy. It absolutely aids in the diagnostic understanding, and it helps establish treatment relationships. One of the things I've noticed with some of the military children that have engaged in play therapy is their ability to go in, and they're very kind of strategic. They have to set the playroom up first. And I just smiled. That's a military kid all the way. Let me clean this up before I start playing. So they're setting these things up, and then you see them start to create within these toys. They create that absent parent. I remember one kid kind of building this wall, and he had the playhouse on this side, but the mom was on the other side. And I said, well, why is she over there? Because she's not here. And then when he brought the mom in, he started knocking stuff over. And I said, well, why is all that stuff falling? Because every time mom comes, this happens. So in my mind, every time mom makes it home from these deployments, there's chaos. He's 4, and this is the way that he's sharing that. It was so powerful to be able to see. Play therapy provides a safe place or a holding environment for children to be able to express things that they may feel like they'll get in trouble for before. I'm almost sure that child hadn't told anybody that when his mom comes home, this is what happens. But he was in an area and in a place to be able to say that. So I said, well, what happens after, all of the stuff falls? He said, we all pick it back up, and then we act like it never happened. I said, so at 4 years old, you're already learning how to pretend bad things haven't happened. Play therapy can be very, very therapeutic for any child, but specifically a military child that has to deal with some of the things that just regular children don't necessarily have to see, as far as a parent leaving, a parent going away, a parent possibly not returning, or the parent returning differently. That happens, and that affects the entire family, especially the child. I think that might be it. One of the things that I learned in play therapy and working with military children is that it absolutely helps them verbalize things that they can't necessarily say. Children's vocabulary isn't strong, right? A kid can't come and tell me, oh, I have so much anxiety, I'm so stressed out. But as they're playing, and I'm seeing the things that they're doing with these toys and these action figures. One little boy, I remember, arrested me. He had his little cop outfit on, and he arrested me. And he sat me down, and he said, now, are you ready to be nice? And I said, I'm ready. I'm ready to be nice. He said, now, you have to apologize to the kids. And I said, okay, what did I do to the kids? He said, you always yell at them, and it's not their fault. So he has this father that's been deployed that comes back, and he is a beast. And I'm assuming police got called, maybe not. But he arrested me and told me that I needed to sit down and that I had to be nice to the kids. So I went back in and I apologized to all the little plastic children that were in the room. And he said, very good. And then we sat down and we played something else. And in my mind, I'm like, he doesn't even have the language to say, I want my dad to be nicer to me. And if he doesn't, I don't want to talk to him. It was just, in my mind, I'm like, gosh, okay, I know what you need now. I know how to help you now. Helping the child act out unconscious material and relieve some of the accompanying tensions. That's what I seen with this young man. He was really wound up behind what was taking place at home. And the reason they brought him in is because he was having issues at school. What was he doing at school? Picking on other kids. Why was he picking on other kids? Because there was a big kid at home picking on him. Why was this big kid picking on him? Just returned from a deployment.
Would you say that most of what you're seeing is dealing with reintegration versus adjustment?
Yeah, I would. Ironically enough, the adjustment that I do see comes from older, the teens, now adjusting to having this another authority figure. But it's not as difficult to say, okay, this is dad. How are we going to work this out? This is what I see a lot with the smaller kids. Engaging the child's play interest for eventual use outside of play therapy is a big deal. One of the things that we saw in working with a lot of these smaller children was that we needed to make sure when they left, they were able to take these things they learned and how to play with them. So whenever they started to feel kind of wound up at home, or whenever they started to kind of have those feelings of anxiety or nervousness, or they were getting ready to act out certain behaviors, they kind of had these little key things they would do. Little stress ball, or for one little boy, he actually wasn't a child. He was more about 12 years old, but he was engaging in cutting. So we started the rubber band technique with him. Instead of cutting, you got to do rubber bands. And that was something he was able to take with him. So there have been so many things that we've learned just in the process of working with these military children and to identify. And one of the things personally that I've learned is how similar military children are to children in foster care. So it's completely opened my eyes to a whole nother concept of ways to work with children that are in foster care, as they identify a lot with some of the things military children are dealing with as well. So what did we talk about? We talked about the military branches, gave you an introduction to that, introduced what it is an active duty military child and teen is, some of the things they face, the things that set them apart, some of the psychological effects that some military children and teens have, what the deployment impact looks like, and how we use some strength-based therapeutic treatment options to work with this population. So it has been my absolute pleasure. I am not very long-winded. As you see, we are only about 1 hour and 10, so ask some questions so I look important when they post this. Yes, ma'am.
What is the military doing for families? Because this information is known, it's not like it's a secret.
Mm-hmm.
What type of support are families receiving in the different branches?
Believe it or not, the military is very good about taking care of families, specifically of deployed people. That's kind of where my gripe is. Like, don't focus just on those that are deployed. There are other people who still need assistance. But each of the military installations has what's called a family readiness center, okay? And the family readiness center is kind of this all-encompass support center. You can go in there and get food for groceries. You can go in there and get any type of financial assistance. They have therapists there that are on staff. So, you know, a lot of military people don't necessarily care to go to get mental health. This is why I'm standing in the position I'm in now. When I was active duty Air Force, I had not yet decided what I wanted to study until we started seeing people that lived in the dorms with us stressing out behind all kinds of stuff. They got a parent back home that's sick and, you know, relationship issues, and they were terrified to go ask for help because they knew that if they said the wrong thing, they could lose their security clearance. They could end up not in a position that they were in, so they wouldn't risk it, so they just bottle it. The family support centers or the family readiness centers have offered the ability for military members to speak without it ever going on record. And that's powerful because now that I know I have this outlet and it's safe, it's a strong possibility I'm going to go and I'm going to tell the truth. And I'll be able to get the help I need because I know there's not going to be a repercussion to my career. So a lot of the military, every military installation has family readiness centers. The Military One Source, I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's like the EAP program of the military, Employee Assistance Program. Say that again?
They take down a lot of information.
They really do. And the Military One Source is almost too much. Have you ever went to a website and you're like, okay, I can't, that's just a lot. It almost needs to kind of be broken out, but it's a ton of information, a ton of free support. They will give a military member 8 free therapy sessions outside of the military installation. They can go see a civilian. I had a friend at Maxwell where I was stationed who gave birth and her son died when he was 5 months. And she was one of the first people I ever knew to use the EAP, the One Source. And she ended up staying with that therapist. The unfortunate piece was what? She had to pay out of pocket because that therapist was not paneled with TRICARE. So after her 8 sessions was up, now she's doing $90 a week. She still needed that assistance. So there are some other things that I think could potentially be done to better help and support these families, but I think they're on the right track.
So services are only offered if the family wants it. So like if the military, the active duty member is deployed and the family goes with that individual, it's only if the family is seeking those services, or is it mandatory for the family to be evaluated?
Never mandatory. Never mandatory, but it is provided. So like when my children had to stay with one of my civilian relatives, my civilian relative got access to the base, they got access to the commissary, they got access to that same mental health, they got access to the Family Readiness Center. Somebody called them every Friday, hey, you guys okay? Do kids need anything? Now that was above and beyond. I know that's not the case for everybody, but they made sure my folks were taken care of while I was away. Was it mandatory? Did they have to? No. The military member, however, upon returning from deployments, they must go through a psychological screening. The deal with that is, you've taken online exams. I know what to say to not look like I don't need to look. So click, click, click. No, not at all. Yes, I had one nightmare, because if you say you had none, triggers. One nightmare, oh yeah, I got out of it. I went to the gym, I worked out, I'm doing great, I have support, finished. They figured out how to do it. That's where the problem comes, because it's a possibility you really do need the help. And this is the tool they're attempting to use to identify that. But if you've learned it, now I have to wait on you to say you really need help. And I'm hoping that you'll say it before military police get called to your house because you and your spouse are fighting, or before your kid takes a weapon to school. Yes, sir.
What do you tell colleagues that they don't have any military background in their immediate family? Maybe they have a grandfather or something, and it affected their family, but they don't have any direct immediate family background that was in the military.
I don't think I quite understand.
So as professionals, we're trying to help whoever it is that does have military, they're in the military.
Okay.
But you don't have any military background in your immediate family. Maybe you had a grandfather or something, but you don't really know how it is.
My recommendation at that point would be to contact Family Readiness on your nearest installation. You don't have to be a military member to reach out to Family Readiness. They will help anybody. I go there all the time just to get, hey, y'all got teen groups this week? Leave my card just in case those families need some outside support. Not everybody wants to drive to the base to do certain things. So if you have somebody that you're dealing with or working with that is military and you're like, I'm not really well versed in this, reach out, because the Military One Source is a place that anybody in this room can create a username, password for Military One Source and receive information just to be able to support. The military mental health is available. Not my favorite. The only reason they're not my favorite is because they're very much geared towards CBT therapy, which I think is fantastic. However, I don't know how I feel about that for the military child that's dealing with a parent deployed. I don't necessarily need to change your behavior. I know why your behavior is happening. So I kind of shy away from them just a little bit. But there are so many other resources that you do have as a clinician to be able to say, look, I got a military family in here that I'm trying to help. Tell me what I need to know. And they'll be able to offer some support. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to comment. My head was going to get hurt by saying, yeah. I'm with a dependent wife for 20 plus years, 2 children going through it. Never did deployments, but tons of TDYs,
Yep.
tons of TDYs. Short, I mean, they would be short in comparison to most people, but gone all,
Mm-hmm.
Now he still works for the government. And he's still TDY.
Interesting.
And I said, I think you're getting TDY more than you were active duty. But it's so true. And for the spouse, you start all over. Now they're looking at helping that spouse find a job. But when I was still, I started all over.
Every time you move.
And you're a licensed social worker, and you want to take a test in every school in every state. So you recreate yourself, and you substitute teach, you're a Tupperware dealer, you're anything. So until you move where you want to stay, So I just want to compliment you. Yes, you hit it on the head.
Thank you.
Children and as a spouse.
Fantastic. Thank you for saying that, because my nerves, whoo, girl, okay. It's just so much information, and I have had the fortunate experience of being on both sides as a single military parent of my siblings and now as a veteran, a therapist who works with these families, and just having that kind of third eye to say, man, I know what you're about. Now you got to refresh this resume, all over again. And luckily the military has done some fantastic things to help spouses. They can carry a lot of their jobs with them. They get what's called a point preference. So when they're applying for certain jobs, their resumes go up here and there's a preference other than, you know, some civilian people that may be looking for that same job, all in an effort to try to make the family transition as smooth as possible. Is it gonna work all the time? No.
I just wish they would do that for the retired wife. Because because, you know, we still move.
You get a point preference as a retiree, you don't?
It's only the active duty.
Only him.
I don't get any point preference, and I never did when he was active duty. So I'm glad that they're doing it now, unless you know something to tell me.
If he has a disability rating from the VA, you get a preference.
It's only 20%.
He needs to be 50. Tell him to go back. Tell him at night he ain't breathing like he should. He ain't breathing like he should.
Trust me, I would.
Well, so I grew up a military child, Army, so like everything you said, I'm like, yeah, that was like, now I have words to describe what me and my brothers went through. One thing that when we were living overseas in Germany, so it was very, I used to say like small base, kind of almost like a small town culture at times. And one thing that my parents, when we were living overseas, was that we didn't really get involved in those kind of like groups. We were very careful about what we share with others, just because I have friends whose dads were commanders, as my dad was. And so coming back to San Antonio, where it's a much bigger, it's larger, but still, how do you manage the confidentiality, and how do you convince parents to get your kid involved with therapy? Because that's what I wish I was involved in, because I think that could have helped me. But there's that, with my parents, there's that fear that, well, I don't want you to say something
That's gonna
that's going to get back to the parents, that will get me in trouble.
That's that's an excellent question, because in a small installation, Maxwell Air Force Base was my first base in Montgomery, Alabama. And Maxwell is a very small installation. So if I told you something that morning at lunchtime, the first sergeant's like, we need to talk. Nothing's wrong. I heard. What did you hear? How did that happen that fast? And it's the culture, right? Because you're so small, everybody's so kind of inundated with one another, which is great for support, bad when you need help. Because everybody wants to help, and not everybody quite knows how to help. And then you have, you know, parents, or you have, you know, people that are over you and saying, hey, you can't say this. I want you to be honest, but don't say this. I've seen that before. Fortunately, with the Family Readiness Center and Military One Source is not, quote unquote, a government entity. So when somebody of an EAP, Employee Assistance Program, like myself, a military member comes to me and we're talking and, you know, they share things with me, the confidentiality that I have in my practice goes with that military member. You know, that commander can't say, hey, I'm such and such and I need the records. Congratulations. No. And that's the end of that. And when I get subpoenaed, I have a choice. And it's never gotten that far, but it's something that I'm able to verbalize to a member to kind of give them a little bit of comfort. And I'll tell them often, so we have what's called AFSCs. That's the Air Force Specialty Code. That is what your job is. I was a 3 Delta, 3D. The mental health in the military, or in the Air Force rather, are 4 Ns. Okay, so whenever I meet with a military person and they're kind of like, I'm like, I don't have anything to do with the 4 Ns. And then he goes, you don't have to tell them, I don't talk to them. So it's really a matter of getting that parent comfortable with the idea that what they share, what their child shares, what happens is safe. And sometimes that can be a bit of a task, even so much so that the parent is not really open to their child getting therapy. That's kind of where we have to work a little harder as clinicians to say, hey, your kid needs this. I'll do my best to protect them as much as I absolutely can, but at the same time, if you don't get them this help, there's going to be a couple of things you're going to deal with later on that can be a whole lot worse than him failing math right now. So luckily, as I shared, the Military One Source has provided that kind of outlet where people aren't afraid to use it, because people have used it and it hasn't affected them. So people see that. And they're like, oh, so that never got back to, so this didn't happen, and so people will give it a try.